Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. For some time now, we've been learning about the role slavery played in the founding and funding of many U.S. universities. While we tend to think of slavery as largely Southern, many well-known colleges and universities in northern states also benefited from slave labor, including Yale, Harvard, and Brown. Today, EdCast presents the story of one woman who confronted her own family's links to slavery and their connections to a legacy of slavery at Mars Hill University in North Carolina. We will also speak with a professor at Mars Hill regarding the work he and students are doing to unearth the past and repair the present. Join us for a look both personal and scholarly of the impact of slavery in American higher education. Coming up now on EdCast. Lee Guion grew up in North Carolina and graduated from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She recently uncovered her family's extensive ties to slavery and discovered that she is a descendant of colonial and Confederate enslavers from New York and North Carolina. She is a member of the San Francisco Oakland chapter of Coming to the Table and writes for Bittersweet, a working group of bloggers who share joint connections to slavery through slaveholders and those enslaved. Lee Guion is also a retired respiratory therapist and textbook author living in San Francisco. David Gilbert is an associate professor of U.S. and African American history at Mars Hill University. He is the author of The Product of Our Souls, Ragtime, Race, and the Birth of the Manhattan Musical Marketplace, a winner of the American Library Association Choice Award for Outstanding Academic Title. His liner notes to the CD companion to the book were nominated for a Grammy Award in 2018. Professor Gilbert's research focuses on determining the university and the region's dependence on slavery in order to retell the story of Mars Hill in ways that speak to the truth about its establishment. Thank you both so much for joining me today. From San Francisco, Lee, and from North Carolina, David, thank you so much. I'm going to begin by reminding of something that Lee has pointed out in the past, that individuals and academic institutions really have a long overdue reckoning of their ties to the purchasing of men, women, and children as slaves and as slaves for life. And Lee herself has a personal story that speaks to her family connections that she's here to talk to us about today. So thank you so much, Lee. And I'm just going to let you start and tell us how you came upon this discovery and what your story is.
Thank you so much for having us, Linda. Sure. I'm really honored. I stumbled upon the initially possibility that my family had enslaved people in far western North Carolina, an area that that I did not know that slavery existed. And it started with stumbling upon a telling of the Mars Hill story or mythology of Joseph Anderson, who was enslaved by a founder of what is now Mars Hill University. The link was that I had not thought much about Mars Hill University or my family in western North Carolina, and Mars Hill University rang a bell when I heard the story. So I went back into some of the papers that my mother had left me before she died, and one of them was a postcard of the initial building at Mars Hill University, and there was a cameo picture of my second great-grandfather as listed Edward Carter. He was a founder of the university and donated the land. So that's when I started thinking about the possibility that their enslavement that I knew was a part of the building of the university, but perhaps it was also a part of my family's history.
And so continues then, so then what happened next?
Well, what I did is, because I'd first been made aware of the story of Mars Hill and enslavement through Joe McGill, I contacted him, and he in turn put me in touch with faculty an archivist at Marshall University, and they in turn sent me the documents that that showed that my ancestors, and specifically the Carters as well as others, had enslaved people.
Let's take a look at some of those documents, all right, because they are primary source material that is really quite interesting, I have to say. And Joseph McGill, just to clarify, he was the founder of the Slave Dwelling Project? And
that's correct.
Okay, okay. So let's take a look at the 3 pieces of primary source material that you've shared with us that I think are so interesting. One is an actual bill of sale that says State of North Carolina, Madison presents to a Roy. Can you tell us what was so interesting to you about that bill of sale? What do we see here that really is kind of staggering?
Well, yes, and these are these are photocopies of the bills of sale from Madison County, and this one from July 17th of 1855. It shows that you can see down on line 7 that there was property that was sold to Edward Carter, my second great-grandfather, 10 Negroes, as well as 10 mules, 2 horses, and 3 wagons, and their harnesses, et cetera, et cetera. And so there it was in black and white for the first time. It's one thing to hear about it and read about it, but to see an actual copy of the sale of other human beings was staggering to me.
I can imagine. Let's look at some of the other documents, all right? There are 2 more. One is mentioning, you have a transcription of bill of sale, and then the State of North Carolina, Madison County, the selling of a girl named Jane. Do you want to tell us what we see here in this one?
Yes, this is also a sale that was to my second great-grandfather. And it was Jane, and was sold to him. She was about 24 years old at the time. Also included in this sale was Ben, her son, who was about 18 months, and also her infant child, who was named Harriet Jane, and she was only a week old.
Wow. And it's right there. And there was one final one, and that also mentions the sale of Negro Boy. Would you tell us a little bit about what we see here? And there is a different family name here. We see the name Ray. Tell us a little bit about this one here.
Yes, there was a sale to my second great-grandfather of a Negro boy. It says Robert, and the chilling thing too is the exact amount, $400 in full. And also the statement after his name that says slave for life. That was in 1857.
And he was 3 years of age.
Yes, they
Wow.
They had obviously been taken from their mothers. The mothers of Robert, and also the ones also in this transcript that you can see, I'm looking at it here. Emma, and then later boy Wilson, and these were in the 1850s. And under their names it says "Slave for Life."
Our viewers can see that. That's unbelievable. So this really is fascinating primary source material. So, excuse me. How did you feel? I mean, what was it like to uncover this?
Well, I was devastated, of course, but I was also embarrassed and chagrined that this information had been available. These documents had been available throughout my lifetime, my parents' lifetime, my great-grandparents' lifetime. It was all right there. But I had never been told that there were enslavers in my family, and I had assumed, as many do, that there was no enslavement in Western North Carolina. There was no enslavement in the Blue Ridge of the Smoky Mountains.
Was
and
there,
that actually maybe black people didn't even live there. It was just a myth.
now, was there something about your family in and of itself that made you less likely to think of them as enslavers, that maybe they didn't fit a certain image that you had in your own mind?
Well, Linda, that's another reason that I was able to be willfully ignorant, I would say, of the fact, because my my ancestors were professional people. They were physicians. They were lawyers. They were administrators and teachers. They owned some small farming, but most of their income derived from their, so I thought, was from their professional lives. And I did not think that people in that category would ever purchase other human beings.
So let's go over to your next steps when you come into contact with Professor Gilbert. So can we just go to Professor Gilbert right now, Lee, or is there anything you want to add before we go over and hear from him what's happening at Morris Hill and the work that they're doing there? So,
No, I'll just go right to David. I say it was certainly a
okay.
fortuitous meeting.
Okay, so Professor Gilbert, I want to ask you, first of all, how did you and Lee meet and get together?
Yes, Linda. Well, thank you for this opportunity
Sure.
to meet and to talk about this topic so important to many of us at Mars Hill University. And I think it was an email relatively out of the blue from Lee. I had been doing research on the story of Joseph Anderson and other enslavers in Western North Carolina for just a couple years prior. And it was a really great timing and a great kind of series of events that got Lee connected to me. Basically, I gave a talk culminating a semester or so of research in February 2020, right before spring break and right before essentially the end of our school semester.
Right.
When COVID hit every college campus. And so I gave a talk to about 100 people, including the college president and dozens of students and community members. It was very well attended. It was, for me, a culmination of a lot of work and the start of a conversation that I hoped to continue on behalf of our African American students. Roughly a quarter of the college students at Mars Hill are African American, a little more actually. And of course, and on behalf of kind of everybody in the community. And then of course, the conversation stopped because so many important world-changing events took place for the rest of 2020. One of them, if I just finish my thought, one of them, of course, was the summer of 2020. And the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and other folks and the public social response to this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, but I believe it was part of that summer that began your interest. And so when you contacted me in 2021, I'd been waiting to talk and to have conversations and share primary source research. I've been waiting for a couple of years at that point.
I'd like to go back to the story of Joe Anderson. Just tell us a little bit about him again, who he was, and the myth surrounding him, and how you've tried to correct those stories about him. What do we know?
Well, can I just say that since 2020, and really for the last 10 or 15 years, many universities across the country have been grappling with their institutional legacies, the stories they tell about themselves, the way they describe the university to incoming students, prospective students, and of course, just the cultural vibe, the campus culture of places like Clemson University, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and so many other schools, including Ivy League schools, northern schools that, of course, have economic roots in enslavement also. And so Joseph Anderson, as Lee said, was one man, one individual who was taken into captivity when the founders of the French Broad Baptist Institute, that's the original name of Mars Hill University, the French Broad Baptist Institute, the French Broad being a lovely river that flows through Asheville, where I live, and up through Madison County, where Mars Hill is located. And they were going to sell him. They were going to put him on an auction block in Asheville. And it's this kind of mythical story. We still don't really know the facts because nobody was there recording, what happened in 1856. But the founders didn't have enough to pay for the $1,100 owed. The man was taken from his family of 3 children, in fact, 2 children at the time, and he had a 3rd child after 1856, and taken from his wife and taken to the Asheville jail. And then somehow, miraculously, the 23 founding families raised that $1,100 to go repurchase Mr. Anderson back. So he joined his family and joined his community in Madison County, but of course also returned to enslavement, where he would be until the end of the Civil War in 1865. He was a bricklayer by trade. He was a skilled laborer, like so many African American enslaved people, rural and urban, famously in places like Atlanta and Richmond, Virginia, certainly in Charleston and New Orleans. There would be hundreds of very skilled workers who worked as enslaved people. And of course, the majority of African American enslaved folks are working in fields picking by the 1850s, picking predominantly cotton, but in North Carolina, tobacco and other crops. And so Mr. Anderson was a skilled craftsman, and probably one of the most skilled folks around the county. It's probably why they chose him to put him up to cover that debt. And unlike so many universities, especially some of the Ivy Leagues that seem somehow shocked of their roots in the slave trade, Mars Hill has always told this story. But they've done it in this kind of odd, self-serving way. And so my research is less about the facts of the case, but more trying to re-narrate and recontextualize this kind of oddly serene and nonviolent story of racism and white supremacy and structural violence, that undergirds these institutions.
Can I ask you, since we're educators, I know you've gotten your students involved in some of this work as well. Can you tell us what their input has been on this?
There's an annual research grant called the Hart Melvin here in the fall, and it's really designed to have one faculty and one student work together on any number of topics, working through our Southern Appalachian research archives. And so I had a student work with me through this initial project, and then invigorate and excite other students, both history majors that I work with quite a bit, but also students that don't necessarily just take my classes and are nursing and social work majors. And so over the coming years, there was a little gap there because of the troubling online Zoom teaching semesters and responding to the global pandemic. But in the last 3 semesters, I've had a lot of student interest, and it's been very rewarding to me. We actually presented as a group at an annual conference in Greensboro, North Carolina, a year ago, really 13 months ago in March 2022. And I
picture of the student panel that you sent us?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yep, I have students, again, ranging from social majors to social work and nursing majors, and one history major there in that photo. And the 5 of us went to a professional conference.
That's great.
It was the students' first time in that setting, and they did a great job helping me present and kind of problematize, as we academics say,
Right.
and also, ask questions and answer questions and really engage with professional historians and sociologists at the university studying slavery. This is a relatively recent consortium. It was actually started in 2017 at the University of Virginia. And so this was the first conference. I actually was there at the original one personally, just as a faculty member interested in the topic. But the first time I was able to go present was in 22 with my students. And so, they're fired up to get the university to better narrate and maybe celebrate folks from the past, not just Mr. Anderson. I think one of the challenges is when Mars Hill talks about Joseph Anderson, this one guy who kind of sacrificed for the founding of the college, then we kind of gloss over the other 200 plus Black folks living in Madison County in 1856, or 1,700 enslaved people in Asheville at that time. And so it kind of becomes like this unique, singular story about one interesting person, and rather kind of by glossing over, as Lee said, for many people, they don't know about African Americans living in Appalachia, in southern Appalachia. This is not the plantation south of South Carolina or the Tidewater or Alabama. But of course, in the South, in the 19th century, there are enslaved and free African Americans everywhere.
So let me go back now, because we're going to be running out of time soon. I want to get back to Lee and to you, and I want to ask Lee, first of all, again, why it's so important to tell this story and what you both think are the next steps. People always talk about, what do we do when we find out about this? So Lee, let me go to you again for a moment and just ask you, why tell this story? What do you hope to accomplish by coming on a program like ours? I know you've given talks in other places. Why tell it?
I think it's very important for the wholeness, I'll say, for myself, for my family, for the institution like Mars Hill University that my family was involved in, to tell the truth, the unvarnished truth of that enslaved people that were captured and brought to this country enslaved were responsible for the well-being, the pure existence of institutions, and the well-being and wealth and success of my families. And that's critical. And I feel that the more I tell this truth, and I tell it in community with other people, like Dave, like the students at Mars Hill University, the organizations I'm involved with, the more we can heal as a country. Without the truth-telling, we can't even start. And I do believe in reparations and in restitution, and I think there are a lot of ways those things can happen. But part of the restitution that I'm trying to make is supporting the students at Mars Hill University to speak their truth and the truth of the university, faculty like Dave, and again, in community with other people around the country who are doing this. It's a little step, but it's an essential step. And I think it will turn into a movement.
I don't have to tell each of you that we live in a very divided America right now. And I know there are some people, when they hear you talking about reparations and restitution, they are very adamantly opposed to such a notion. And I know that does not come as a surprise to either one of you. But I do want to ask you, how do you see us moving forward? And to you, what does reparations mean? Just let's give us some sense, both Dave and Lee, of what you think would be reparations, and what are the next steps that we could conceivably take in this country to acknowledge this horrible past of ours and go forward. Dave, any thoughts about what you think the next step should be?
Sure. Well, of course. I very much love Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, The Case for Reparations, that he initially published in Atlantic Monthly and has since been in his book, 8 Years We Were in Power, I think. I have the original magazine that I still teach to my class. we were in power 8 years, I think. But Coates, certainly there's ways to think about structural change and economics, and really complicated and probably not particularly politically popular ways to move forward. But one of Coates's main arguments is that we need a national, truthful reckoning with our past.
Sort of like South Africa?
And yeah, like a commission, like a recognition, a research, so that the historical work that I and so many hundreds of professional historians do, it doesn't just become the select information that handfuls of our students get, but it really helps explain structural inequalities, racial, but also gendered, class differences as they're embedded in our U.S. society. That by understanding not just slavery, but Coates also inspired me to take my story about Joseph Anderson through the Jim Crow era. A lot of my talk and research is really thinking about African Americans who were working in Mars Hill campus, well, when they couldn't even go here. Their children couldn't even go here. They're doing all this labor. And so really thinking about, reparations, not just for the old days of slavery, like as if they were so far away, but the time of Jim Crow, in which there are just hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people still living who lived through Jim Crow. And so there's kind of the good it would do the nation intellectually, educationally, and arguably morally, to really own up to a truthful past, the way Lee has, the way Lee's modeling for so many, and her organizations are modeling, would just go a long ways to some aspects of racial healing. Will white supremacy, racial healing ever just be over? Certainly not with a snap of our fingers, but thinking about the structural elements in an honest way will necessitate, I think, some open hearts and open minds to difficult commonalities.
Thank you both so much. Lee Guion, coming to us from San Francisco. Thank you both so much. And David Gilbert from Mars Hill University in North Carolina. Thank you so much, each of you, for sharing your stories and your research. And I really hope that by telling these stories, as you've said, we can make reparations, restitution, and go forward. Thank you all, both of you, so much for joining us. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
To hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to CUNYEdcast@gmail.com.